Land Management, the Highway Patrol, as well as volunteers with our Missoula Search and Rescue Team, an amazing recovery was made and the life of the child was saved. We had law enforcement officers from almost every jurisdiction converge to the area to help find this child. No doubt an incredible thing to witness. We are so grateful for the working relationships that we have with these folks and that this child was ultimately found alive. Our office has been inundated with calls from our local community as well as around the country commending the outstanding efforts of our law enforcement officers and offering their compassion, assistance, and support for this child. So today, we want you to have the opportunity to talk to two of the law enforcement officers who found the child alive. Missoula County Sheriff's Deputy Ross Jessup and U.S. Forest Service Law Enforcement Officer and Special Deputy Nick Schultz. Please keep in mind there is an ongoing criminal investigation as well as confidentiality concerns related to the protection of the child. So we can't discuss any specific details about the case or the child's identity further than what we've already released. So with that, I'll introduce you to Missoula County Sheriff's Deputy Ross Jessup and Forest Service Law Enforcement Officer Nick Schultz.
If you want to begin by just maybe, if y'all are okay with it, just walking through a narrative of when you were called out and just the events as they unfolded, and then maybe we can go from there.
Take over first. Yeah. So about 8 o'clock, deputies responded to a call up Lolo Hot Springs involving a male that was acting a little bit strange, odd behavior. There was at the time mention of he's just being disorderly. So there was 2 deputies that were responding to deal with that. A short time later, that same male said that he had some weapons in his pockets. Me as a canine handler at that point decided that that was a call that I was going to respond to as well. While we were responding to that call, the possibility of a crash started coming out, and then there was this baby inside of the crash or around the crash, and then all of a sudden more information involving the fact that we just had a baby that was lost, and that was really what was important. We didn't know where to begin searching, and by the time we all got to the hot springs, the male in question had already left, ran back towards the forest. So we had nothing to go off of. Myself, Highway Patrol, BLM, Deputy Zach Rush and Deputy Zach Sargent, Highway Trooper Novak, scoured every dirt road imaginable up Highway 12 corridor with no sign of that blue car. I happened to drive up a road that I drove up as far as I could before I couldn't go anymore. I was in a Durango, the paint's getting scratched, the undercarriage is getting torn up. I'm feeling guilty for, breaking a Sheriff's Department owned vehicle. I got to a point in that road where it's just not practical to keep driving. And so I told Corporal Sargent that, hey, we got to stop. This road is absolutely ridiculous. It's a dead end here. The only thing that could even make it past where I'm at is a 4-wheeler or an ATV. So we backed out. Several hours later, the suspect male came back to the hot springs, was detained by civilians, an off-duty Forest Service officer, Patrick Legg, who obtained more information about the missing child and the fact that there was a missing child. Myself, Deputy Rush, and Forest Service, BLM officers Kelly Cole and Dennis, I think his name is Dennis at this time, I can't remember exactly who. We were able to find and ID his campsite. We were able to search the immediate area of that campsite, and we didn't find anybody. There was more evidence of baby items. There was some wagons and a couple other things that belonged to babies. So now we're in our heads, we're thinking, okay, there is no more questioning. There is a baby. There is definitely a baby somewhere. We just don't know where. So we backed out, and honestly, we got to our car when 911 got on the radio with Deputy Rush saying, hey, the suspect's back in Lolo Hot Springs, he's being detained. So we went there. We tried to interview him as best he could. He was basically in a state of mind where we weren't getting much information at all. I asked Corporal Sergeant if it would be okay if we put the male in the backseat of Deputy Rush's car and had him drive us to the location of the crash. And we tried that and a number of other things with no success. The only consistent thing that myself and Corporal Sergeant were getting was the fact that he drove over and crashed into a mountainside, and the only thing that kept ringing true to me was he kept mentioning he drove over trees and a bush. And I just knew at that point that the road that I had previously driven up was the same road that he had to have gone up. So that's when I asked that Corporal Sergeant if we could call out search and rescue, get everybody coming, ask for Forest Service's help because they had access to the ATV and stuff. And at that point, I made phone calls to Captain Bill Burt, who's head of the search and rescue. And he asked me, he's like, Ross, is this a legitimate deal? Do we have anything to go off of? And I told him over the phone, we still don't have the location of the car. It's our best guess, but me and Nick Schultz are going to go up in a four-wheeler to the end of a road I'd driven up, and I just had a gut feeling that we would find the car and the baby there. And so then Nick showed up, and he's the hero for the rest of the night.
I don't know about that. I was off shift at home, got the call about the missing child. I was familiar with the suspects in this case, knew that we'd been dealing with them the last couple months, camped up in the woods, so I knew where they were, in the general area, and I kind of had a good idea of the area around the hot springs as well. So when I come in service, tell out over the radio that I'm responding to the hot springs, Corporal Sergeant requests that I go get my all-terrain vehicle or my side-by-side to help with the search. I pick that up at the office quick and then run up to the hot springs. At that point, Corporal Sergeant tells me, hey, Ross is going to jump in with you. He has a pretty good idea where the car might be at. So we go up this narrow forest road that's overgrown in places, approximately about a mile up from Highway 12. And the roadbed just ends, and it ends just abruptly to kind of a game trail. And myself and Ross, we hop out of the side-by-side, and we're like, well, shoot, where's the car? It's not here. And we walk down this game trail a little bit thinking like, is there a car crashed somewhere nearby? And we start to see tire tread on this game trail. And then we walk a little bit further, and we see a couple of trees that have been scraped up. This is a steep side hill angle. We're thinking there's no way there's a car that could travel down here. I didn't feel safe taking the ATV down this game trail at all. And we follow it to a point, maybe 20 yards, 30 yards from the end of the road, maybe further. We find the suspect vehicle with the dome light still on. And keep in mind, this is at 1 o'clock in the morning, so everything's pitch black except for our flashlights. And seeing that dome light through the woods, we start running up to the suspect vehicle and look inside. We see the car seat, baby car seat. We see the baby car seat's empty. From there, we began kind of searching out, around the car to see if we can find any evidence of where the suspect might have gone, where the baby might be. As this is going on, search and rescue, volunteer search and rescue folks are inbound to our location to kind of help us grid out the area around the car. About 7 or so yards downslope from where the car is crashed, I find some little children's trivia cards, and I call out to Ross, hey, we have something here. Let's maybe focus our search downslope from where the car is at. So we start kind of gridding out, heading further downslope, and then I find a thing of like baby formula, like a container of baby formula and a piece of clothing in the bushes as well. And this is obviously stuff that hasn't been weathered. Looks like it was recently placed there. So search and rescue folks are starting to arrive at our location. I'm trying to tell them where we're at. Ross is working his way further down the hill and find some more baby trivia cards and some feminine hygiene products as well. We get search and rescue folks linked up with ourselves at that point. We start kind of scouring the area down kind of by this draw. And I don't know which one of us kind of caught out of the corner of our eye, kind of upslope from the last little bit of trivia cards, a towel, like a baby carrier, and a diaper bag upslope. And at that point, me and Ross, I remember we ran up there thinking that we were going to find a baby right there by where the baby carrier was laying on the ground, and we didn't see the baby. So we kind of searched that general area. It was a little bit of an opening, but fairly thickly timbered, I would say. Searched down below that area for a while, and Ross said, well, there's this pretty beaten game trail, small little single track trail up above where the diaper bag was and where the baby carrier was. Maybe after dropping this stuff here, he went uphill. Said, yeah, let's give it a shot. So we hiked up the hill for 15-20 minutes, something like that. And as I'm coordinating with other search and rescue folks, other folks who are coming on scene, starting from the location of the car and starting to kind of search from that area. Both me and Ross hear, I call it a little baby murmur, little baby talk. I wasn't really, how would you describe it, Ross?
The sound I heard was an exhausted, tired baby who didn't have the lung capacity to cry anymore. And it was just a very faint whimper.
And at that point, we just started running, in that direction where we were hearing that baby voice, and we heard it another time.
There, one more time.
Yeah. And then I saw you pick up the baby.
Yeah. He was so well concealed as we were walking. I mean, mind you, I have a headlight and a 500, 600 lumen candle power flashlight with me. And I was literally taking a step and I was about ready to walk on top of the baby's head. I heard the sticks crack when I looked down and I saw a baby face down. And I uncovered him with the sticks and stuff, and I immediately just picked him up. He was cold, he was wet and soiled. Couldn't even cry, but we wrapped him up. One of the search and rescue folks who was with us, he doesn't want to be named, but Aaron St. Pierre gave us his down coat and a beanie hat. We covered the baby up immediately and walked him out. And the only thing I can say about this whole thing is it was a miracle. People go through, lows in their careers, especially being the cops. I had prepared myself mentally to find a dead baby, if at all. And seeing and hearing that baby overcame me with so much joy, and I have 3 kids. They're all girls. When I heard that baby murmur, I was so happy. I was more happy than hearing my own daughters cry for the very first time. And I'll never, ever doubt the Lord.
What did the baby do after you picked him up? Did he make more noises? Did he seem to settle in?
He settled in pretty good. He was coughing a little bit. He actually coughed up a few sticks out of his mouth. Like I said, he was cold, and even though you could tell he was comforted with the appearance of humans and the contact being swallowed up in a down blanket, he was obviously distressed because I mean he couldn't talk, or I mean he was done. He was alert, but he was tired.
What time did you find him?
I think it was about 2:30 in the morning.
So the time elapsed from the time that you got up on the game trail up until this point. How long was that?
So we found, I called out over the air that we found the Corsica at 1:30. So between finding the finding the suspect car, till the time we found the baby was approximately an hour from the call notice. But maybe 10, 15 minutes, maybe a little bit longer, hiking up the hill from that game trail.
Would you say this is the hardest thing you've had to deal with in your career?
No and yes. I mean, everybody, like, this is truly an amazing thing, and it was so positive,
Yeah.
but at the same time, the circumstances behind it all suck. You know, cops every day deal with, most of the time, the worst. And this circumstance, this situation, this call, this isn't a happy call by any means. There's a little baby that was being neglected, but the baby's alive and doing well.
Could
Yeah,
you
it was
tell the
pretty cool.
baby was going to be okay when you first picked him up? Can you talk about just the initial thoughts that you had as you were picking him up? What you checked for? What was there a procedure you followed to make sure that he wasn't about to?
Well, to be totally honest, my my father instincts came in. I abandoned any police training or any chance of saving evidence there. I didn't care. I scooped up a baby, made sure he was breathing. He had a sparkle in his eye, warmed him up, gave him a couple of kisses, and just held him.
And how was it getting out of the? It sounded like you were pretty far up that road and game trail. How did you transport the baby out? Can you describe that? How long that took? And
It was probably around a 15-20 minute walk. I carried a little baby, and Nick and the other search and rescue guy that was with us. They made sure I didn't fall or collapse or do anything stupid like I always do.
That was happiest 15-20 minutes of my career. You know, I was just stunned. I mean, you know, walking into this situation, we were mentally preparing for the worst. So that way, when we did come across, you know, the worst, we would be able to respond and do the appropriate, what we needed to do as law enforcement officers. And to have, you know, Ross holding this, you know, baby with a twinkle in his eye was absolutely surreal, unreal, you know. I was just blown away with how, I mean, he seemed happy, healthy. Happy,
Like
healthy
he was
baby.
expecting you.
Yeah, I don't,
I think you could say that.
yeah.
whose finger was the baby holding on to? Was that one of yours? Or no, that was in the picture. No.
No,
Okay,
that was,
just wanted
that was
to
someone
confirm.
else's.
It's Captain Milbert.
Have you gone to check on the baby since hospitalized? Just
I have not.
And you had mentioned, I just want to make sure, understand, they were camping in the area?
Yes.
And was the mother there also camping in the area?
Yes, she was.
Okay. So when the crash happened, was it just the man and the baby in the car, or was the mother in the car as well?
So as far as that goes, we'll just leave that, you know, for later. It's being investigated. We don't have those answers yet that we can give out.
Okay. In relation to the hot springs, can you give an approximate location, like X miles southeast of the hot springs, where was
I
that?
would say between half a mile and a mile southwest.
Yeah.
And up until that point, how big of a radius had the search area been?
You'd gone down Graves Creek. I mean,
I would say before we knew where the car was, hundreds of acres, hundreds.
yeah.
And it's been described as the child was buried beneath a pile of sticks and debris. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more, what that looked like? It wasn't actually buried into the ground. It was.
No. So like I said, the baby when we found it, I almost walked right on top of him. I couldn't see him because he was concealed with a pile of just sticks and branches, just the dead sticks and branches, not like you build a fortified house or anything. It was just the baby was covered up about a foot by loose sticks and branches that you'd build a fire with.
Like somebody had just trying to hide something.
Yeah, or covered up just in a nonsensical way. There was just sticks covering the baby.
So are you still trying to determine if that was like intentional or just kind of out of his mind?
Yeah, that'll be all what the detectives will be working on with their interviews and the investigation.
How far up the mountain from the highway was he found, would you say?
I would say a mile from Highway 12.
Did either of you have contact with the suspect?
I did. Like I said, I actually interrogated him a little bit, trying to figure out where he had crashed and whether or not the baby was even a real thing or not. Like I said, I put him in another deputy's car, and we drove to a point where he told us to, and we still couldn't find the baby there because the baby clearly wasn't where he told us it was.
So was the first indication that there was a baby involved from the suspect, from his telling you that there was a baby?
That I don't know. I don't know who gathered that information. I just know that I was there initially responding to a guy that potentially had weapons, and then it turned into something that was just completely different than how the call originally came out.
And how are you both doing now? Are you still in shock?
I'm not in shock. I truly believe in God and His work. Like I said before, I personally have been experiencing a pretty low point in my career. I'm going on 10 years. I've got to the point where it's just like everything's just so draining emotionally, and to experience this, to have God help me, let me experience something like this, just gives me an extra boost. Like, you know what, cops actually do matter sometimes. Like, we actually do a good job. So it's pretty encouraging for me.
How has this affected the rest of the sheriff's office?
I don't know yet.
Is that something you can answer, Sheriff?
Sure, you bet. So we've just had an outpouring of support. This is such a emotional call for our office and those involved and those that are here at the office taking the calls afterwards. But we're proud of our team. We're proud of the work that's been done by our deputies and our law enforcement partners and our search and rescue members who've been out just time and time again helping us through these situations. So it's a good feeling to know that there's a baby that's alive because of the relentless, tireless dedication and efforts of these two officers and the others and the volunteers that were up Highway 12 near Lolo Hot Springs that night. So I'm super proud of them. It's good that we're here to have this moment and share this with the press and with the public. This is a job well done.
Do you have a head count on the number of searchers total who were involved?
We had about a dozen total people that had responded to the area. We had at least 5 members of the Missoula Search and Rescue Team that were called out and responded to assist.
Only 2 on that road and game trail, though, huh?
Initially, yeah.
Which Forest Service road was it?
It's unnamed road. It's an old logging 2-track that hasn't been used for a long time.
Was there a camp? Is there a campground up there, or were they coming from the campground at Lolo Hot Springs, or were they just in a random location?
Well, that's unknown. Yeah, we know that they were both camping in the area, and then at some point the vehicle went up that road and was involved in a crash. And